Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup for the week of July 27th, 2026. Got a big show for you this week, guys. Big breaking news. Teased some of it last week. Marie Newmiller is going to join us for two very large stories that we're happy to bring to you. But before we get to Marie, as per usual, take a look at the headlines from around the nation. And we're going to lead off with those quick hits with another big story coming out of Massachusetts, where a multi-year effort has led the citizens to have the ability to vote to repeal Chapter 135, which, if you guys remember, going back a few years now, we've been reporting on that omnibus gun control package, all of it unconstitutional, that was rammed through in the dead of night under dubious conditions under the governor's emergency preamble, was signed into law and has been being litigated ever since. Well, now that effort with the our friends and partners in goal, along with the Civil Rights Coalition, were able to garner the 100,000 plus signatures needed to get on the ballot. So all that to say, issue number 9 on the Massachusetts ballot, November 3rd. Sportsmen and women are going to need to show out, all of you, and then tell your friends, tell your family. Those non-resident sportsmen that like to go to the Bay State need to do the very same and get everybody online. So big opportunity there in Massachusetts to right some wrongs of the past. Going down to the Hill, House Committee advances a longstanding polar bear import legislation. This was going back to 2008 when the ESA was implemented for polar bears, and affects a few hunters there from bringing their imports of their polar bears that were legally hunted into the country. So some movement on that and trying to get some changes there for those folks. This would update the Marine Mammalian Act and allow for that importation of those bears. So that is positive news. I have opined on that Marine Mammalian Act in the past. And matter of fact, I'm just going to say it. This past weekend, I was with some folks in Rhode Island, and a lot of folks there in the local community of fishermen and recreational salt folks, and talking about the issues of shark depredation, shark presence. And we're going to get into an article from Chris Horton here on shark depredation. But the issue has been this overpopulation of seals on the south shore of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, warm waters. Those sharks are even going outside of Cape Cod, coming up towards the waters here in New Hampshire and Maine. And because of that Marine Mammalian Act, there's no action that can be taken on these seals. There's no management. They just keep reproducing, showing up, and creating quite the buffet for these sharks. So anyway, a lot of pieces tied in there, and the bottom line is you can't do anything with them. And maybe there's a opportunity to look at that Marine Mammalian Protection Act on those seals down the line. But that's just your host's humble opinion, and we'll move on. Wildfires remain hot on Capitol Hill. We talked to Ken Keene last week about Fix Our Forest. Focused look at prescribed burning. Mentioned the article by Chris Horton as it relates to the Shark Act here. It is Shark Week, so this is apropos. Again, this is another one we've covered a number of times. We've had Chris come on, and right now, like many of our pieces of legislation, the hang-up is in the Senate. And if you watch the nightly news, you kind of probably have a clue as to why that is. So some of our issues that remain nonpartisan and not so threatening are getting hung up because of some other things going on down there. But we continue to press and try to get things done. Michigan legislature adjourns for the summer without addressing conservation funding needs up there. Department of Natural Resources relies on the licenses purchased by sportsmen and women to carry out its function in the Great Lakes region. Michigan Senate bills 276 and 277 would adjust hunting license fees while ensuring that Michigan Department of Natural Resources captures revenue from discounted licenses in Michigan. And the Michigan House Bill 5093 would similarly adjust fishing licenses. So, missed opportunity there, but maybe they can bring that back. Finally, a little attaboy for our own Mark Lance there in the South, as he is proud to serve on the steering committee of the National Wild Pig Task Force. Through my conversations with Mark, learning all about this and just how involved this is. And for those of you with wild pig populations in your states, you know about appreciate the need for such a task force and this committee and working for solutions on that. That's it for the look around the headlines across the country. General housekeeping here, folks. NASCAR registration early bird is open. If you're coming to Oklahoma City the first week of December and joining us, and you should, get your registration in now. Save yourself some bucks. Get registered. Get in on those Friday events. There's a whole great lineup of outdoor events and tourist events, and those always sell out real quick. So don't be left in the dark on that and wanting to come to NASC and then not join us for some of those outdoor activities because you slept on it. I think that's it for the housekeeping. All right, let's get to Marie now because, like I said, we got some big stories. Marie, welcome in. You're tired. You've been burning the midnight oil on a lot of this.
Thank you, Fred. Happy to be here and appreciate you taking time to highlight our wins that we've had out west recently.
Yeah, no doubt. So, recent weeks, last week you were on, the week before and the week before that, I think, we're generally focused on IP28. And then we were talking about this Colorado fur ban bill, which we covered as breaking news last week, even though we couldn't get you on, teased out your article this week. But let's start with the big news on IP28 that came out Friday late evening.
Yes, absolutely. So very late Friday evening, there was a memo circulated from Oregon's Secretary of State letting everyone know that IP28, or the Peace Act, had failed to qualify for the ballot. So after counting the second round of signatures, they only had about 72% of their signatures that were valid, which brought them down to a total of 104,000 signatures. While that's still a lot of signatures in support of this Peace Act, it was not enough to qualify for the November ballot. So it has died officially for the year.
Yeah, and as we've talked about and the audience has heard, if you've kept up with this through this show, is that there's no doubt bits and pieces of this comes back in some sort of way, perhaps and likely not as a ballot measure as Maria has reported, but seeking other avenues. What do we think that looks like? Are they just going to go to the commission and just try to get regulation rule changes? Are they just going to, bully folks at that level, or do we see another avenue?
I think attempts at the commission level are underway, but David Mickelson, the original proponent of IP28, they brought it as IP13 originally, then IP3, now IP28. He has said that they knew it wouldn't pass this year,
Right.
even if it did make the ballot, but that they do want to keep bringing it back. Their ultimate goal is to change the conversation and the way that we talk about and look at wildlife and wildlife management, as well as livestock and farm animals.
It'll be interesting to see what that looks like if they bring a watered down version of it for the ballot. I was under the understanding that they were gonna abandon that idea, that tact for now, and then take a stab at other ways, but perhaps not. Perhaps I was fed incorrect information or my interpretation of it was wrong. Either way, these troublemakers are gonna come back one way or another and create controversy. And as you and I rightly pointed out so many months ago, and when we started covering this, is that there was an acknowledgement that yes, they're going to go for broke. Maybe they get lucky, it gets on the ballot, but we knew and know that these people are just throwing crap at the wall to see what will stick, if anything, and then start chipping away for their little victories and then start stacking those. So, I mean, that's what we got to be wary of. And I would say outside of our purview, but even if they go after the agriculture side, they start going after ranching, there was, and you can speak more to this, but there had to have been a coalition of many interested parties that crossed sportsmen and women with folks that are raising cattle, that had interests in ADC work and animal control work. I got to imagine we got to support everybody once again, even if they become single issues.
Yes, and our Sportsmen's Coalition in Oregon was working alongside the Farm Bureau in the efforts to share educational outreach around IP28, and then had it qualified for the ballot, we would have worked together
Mm.
in opposition to that measure as well. And I think you're absolutely right. That is an area where we can create more coalition and collaboration, because if they do focus on farmers or ranchers, that's going to impact some wildlife management and some of our forestry management. And we need to be working closely with those partners. Same for pest control. You're looking at trappers. That's going to impact trappers in a lot of ways for all the different management of wildlife in the urban areas as well as in rural areas on farms. And these are great areas for us to collaborate and to continue sharing the sportsman's message and making sure that everyone knows the value of the North American model.
Yeah, it can't be harped on enough of our community being able to get outside of our comfort zone and work with different folks that may have different motivations, but we have these things in common that, put that Venn diagram on a board and see the areas where we all overlap. And I think that's even a bigger example of our community as a whole, right? We have this problem internally. Um, when it comes to hound hunting, and then deer hunters not, well, that's not my issue, I don't care. But no, it is your issue because it does affect you, and we all need to come together. So we are kind of a microcosm of that bigger coalition building that you guys did out there, and we could take notes and should act to support all of us. If you don't trap, great, but if you're, if you're an upland hunter and that's all you do, well, those trappers are important to you as a grouse hunter, as a pheasant hunter, whatever it is where you got ground nesting birds, turkey hunters. So anyway, a couple of quick examples there, but Marie, congratulations. I know you personally led the charge, and behind the scenes, we're just working as hard as you could, and then bringing those partners together, and it pays off. So it's got to be a good win for you, and breathe a little sigh of relief for at least for a little while.
Yes, very exciting. And also, I want to share gratitude to our coalition partners who were in the fight as well, but also to our internal team, to you sharing this out through the podcast and helping us with educational outreach, as well as our marketing communications team that really expanded our outreach so that we could reach as many voters in Oregon as possible to share educational information with them ahead of this ballot measure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, your tutorials, we want to call them that, your reels on our social feeds did very well. Were well received and by folks outside of our followership. So that meant your message and your reporting was getting out, which certainly was huge and helped move the needle. Yeah, lots of people to thank in this, but I want to make sure you get your flowers on this because so often the work that we do is done silently behind closed doors and kind of behind the curtain. And when we get these victories, it's good to acknowledge it and fly our flag. And you definitely did that. So job well done. And we're not done. We're not done giving Marie her flowers because another crisis averted that again we teased last week. But Marie, walk us through the fur ban that was proposed that we saw the commission abandon late last week.
Yes. So, as we've talked before, there was a petition, a citizen petition brought to the Colorado Commission that was attempting to end the retail sale of all furs. And this kind of expanded on an attempt that had been made in the city of Denver. Uh, the agency itself had proposed to the commission that they deny that petition because it came counter to a lot of laws that were already existing. It hurt management, and enforcement was difficult. The commission had voted to continue rulemaking and had asked the agency to present them with options that they could choose. So the agency had given them 3 different options to pick from on different levels of retail fur bans for Colorado. But there were a lot of nuances in there that would have crossed against existing state statute, and also some very ambiguous things. Like, it would have allowed furs used for felted hat making in traditional methods. And that's really hard to enforce from an enforcement perspective. Ultimately, after hours of very heated debate and frustrating debate at times, I'll say, the commission voted 6-5, I believe, to terminate rulemaking around the fur ban. Now, that petitioner has said she won't bring that particular petition again, but she does intend to work with the department to try and curb some of the fur sales and trapping, it sounds like.
So while that is good and great, that we got there to, at least pass this one off to another session and not go this full route. It did come out, and I don't see it here, but I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's worth acknowledging that even though we don't have that ban on retail fur sales, we did see a reduction in take for trappers of daily bag limits, which is troubling. And as a trapper myself, when I'm reading this report, I don't know how you can effectively run certain lines and certain equipment. And I don't know. I'll let you speak to it, and then I'll throw my own 2 cents in. But it's got my head scratching, and certainly fur bearer biologists there in Colorado have their targets. They have their reasons for not having bag limits, and all of a sudden they do. If you would go ahead and comment on that part.
Yes, and that was a frustrating vote. Another narrow vote, 6-5, this time for the reduced limits. The agency had recommended during that portion, I believe, a trapping limit of 15 per day. And that was what the sportsman community had supported. I don't think we anticipated the commission taking it that low and going against agency advice. Unfortunately, they're severely restricting a wildlife management tool without a biological need demonstrated in this case. So now when trappers can only take 2, they have a bag limit of 2 per day, you're going to severely impact any efforts that they would have for wildlife management. What immediately came to my mind was trapping around nesting sites during those nesting seasons and getting those mesopredators. If you can only take 2 a day, you may not be having the impact needed to protect those nesting sites in a beneficial way for wildlife management.
Do you know? And I'm trying to pull it up here as we're recording this in real time. It looks like you are not allowed to use conibears in Colorado. Is that accurate?
I would have to double check on that one,
I
but
don't
I know Colorado does have more restrictive trapping than some of our other states.
I gotta imagine, even if you're all right, let's say it's like Massachusetts for beaver. I'm going there first because the water sets, typically this is more challenging. If you're out there with a bunch of Hancock traps, these are the clam traps, I call them, for lack of a better term. They're all like chain link fence squares, and there's a pan in the middle. Beaver sits in it, thing clams around them. So they're live traps. They're not economically feasible. They're like $400 to $500 a piece. So even if you're a professional trapper, you're trying to do beaver mitigation, and you got multiple of these traps out. So let's say you got modestly $3,000 worth of traps out. So you got 6 traps out. And let's say you're a proficient trapper, you hit 5 out of 6, and you're doing a mitigation project for someone that's hired you as a trapper, or you're just participating in management. Well, now you got to let 4 or 3 of that 5 catch go. And then your whole purpose out there is to provide the service to get biological data to submit back to the department. And it's such an extreme dialing down on the dial that it just, I see problems from it. And I see trappers being disenfranchised, especially those who are regulated trappers that they pay their own money for a license to go out there and do it. It may not even be worth their time because the amount that you're allowed to catch, or just the inconvenience of having to release targeted species. It's not like you're catching a non-target species or a species out of seasons. Like, you're getting multiples of what you're out there to do, and then you got to let them go. And that's a wear on material. It's a wear on time. It could definitely be a barrier for entry for recruiting more trappers, which all states need more.
And part of the emotional testimony that was being brought to the commission painted a picture of fur bearers being caught with no restrictions, no limits, just hundreds harvest every day by trappers that are just taking too many, all for the purpose of selling them. And this was the picture that was being painted. Colorado is one of the states that does require reporting. So the agency had numbers, and they said out of everyone that was a licensed trapper, very few actually ever exceeded, say, 10 a day, whatever limit that they were proposing. There were very few trappers that were that successful to create the picture of fear that was being painted by the anti-trapping groups. When in fact, it's a pretty well-regulated, well-managed tool that is being utilized by the agency and allowing trapping to occur as a part of their overall management plan. And this takes that down a way that, I mean, 2 a day almost limits it to the point that it's not an effective management tool for the agency when they're looking at populations.
All right, yeah. So looking this stuff up here as we're talking, Marie, it turns out, and still the point is still to be made. You're only allowed to use live traps in Colorado, which again is not. I mean, for me, I don't think it's financially feasible when you're looking at box style traps like Hearts, like good quality ones. These things are upwards of $30-$40 plus. The real heavy gauge steel ones are every bit of. I've seen them for 60 up to $99. The Hancock clam traps I was talking about, though, like I said, they're like $500. So even if you have all of these and you're putting them out in numbers, because as no doubt the trapper reports would show that effort per trap night will show that a trapper is not air finger quote whacking and stacking. That it doesn't exist. You have to have so many traps out to be successful with 1 or 2 catches on average per trap night effort. If you're only setting less than that because it's just you have these arbitrary limits, like, again, I come back to you, this is going to be a barrier for entry. This is going to be a problem in the future. At least as a regulation, they're going to be able to readjust that up once they find out there's a problem, and won't be a huge process. But there's going to need to be a significant amount of data that's presented back, and that can hopefully overpower these emotional arguments that are not based in science. They're just someone's feelings.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes these emotional arguments get so loud that we forget the overall picture.
Mm.
In an effort to protect the fur bearers, we're forgetting about nesting sites. We're forgetting about calving and fawning seasons, all the times when trapping is a very beneficial tool to help overall populations. And with the type of traps allowed in Colorado and the effort needed, it takes away from that narrative that was being run, that there are just people out there grabbing as much wildlife as they can for personal profit. This isn't a highly profitable business.
No.
It's not the model that they were creating. These are people who care about wildlife and the ecosystems, that are interested in trapping and are working on conservation in their own way. And we're taking that tool away from the overall picture.
Just got a thought, and I was just even more curious as to, yeah, I think this is correct. Trappers need to check their traps every 12 hours in Colorado. That's what I'm reading. All live capture traps must be checked at least once every 12 hours.
Is it 12?
That's madness. It's highly regulated. If you're checking your trap, and then the language is important here. Some states have it once in a 24-hour window. So if you check, you're running a line and you started checking your line at 7 and you end your line at 9, well, you're not starting at 9. You got to start at 7 the next day and run through and check all those traps in 24 hours. In New Hampshire, it's once per calendar day. in this situation, they're out there twice a day checking who knows how many traps. Like, that's already cumbersome enough. Now, it makes it harder and harder for those folks to go out there and do what they do on their dime and at the benefit of all the people of Colorado, whether they know it or not, but certainly parks and wildlife there, because they're not having to hire all those biologists who wouldn't be able to keep up. I'm curious now how many licensed trappers are actually in Colorado that think this is worth their time.
Well, and I think another thing to note too in Colorado is they have two different types of trapping scenarios. You have the general trapper, but there's also a permit available for landowners
Right.
where it does expand the type of traps that are allowed in a 30-day permit period for the
Mhm.
protection of commercial livestock or a commercial crop. And that allows a little bit more leeway. They can use body grip devices, cable devices, and foothold traps on that private land for protection of the landowner's crop. But then outside of that, general trapping is very, very closely regulated.
And that also allows for them dispatching with firearms, bow and arrow, like whatever. So
So
again,
it's complicated in Colorado. There's a lot of additional regulations, a lot of rules to sort your way through. And the petition that was turned down would have tightened those regulations even more on what you could do with that fur
yeah,
after the trap.
yeah,
Luckily, that didn't hold, but these efforts are ongoing in Colorado.
and this goes back to the IP28 result here, that they're just going to keep taking cuts and cuts at it and cuts at it and just get these little victories until it makes it so hard to do that you start just by attrition. People are just bowing out. So they may not have to make the whole practice illegal. They just don't have the participation. And if you don't have the participation, it's real easy to get rid of it.
And that goes back to your earlier point about not only working with outside groups like landowners or livestock producers, but within our community as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
To people in Colorado that don't trap, this might not seem like an issue, and it might not be for them today. But once trapping's gone, what is the next step? And I think it's important that we support the full management and all the tools for the agency, as well as all the opportunities available for sportsmen and women, whether we engage in that particular avenue or not.
And you look at the language there in Colorado too, as it pertains to the type of traps you can use, and it really comes down to the vernacular and their use of the words humane, which there is no standard for what the use of the word humane is. This is left up to interpretation, whoever has the seat of power. So even though you and I would argue that your modern day foothold trap that is scrutinized by best management practices, and the manufacturers are always trying to bring new technology forward to lessen any sort of stress on the animals and not harm them, which we can definitively say the data and the proof is there that they do not. We think that's humane, but these people in Colorado obviously do not. What does it mean when somebody or the majority sitting in those commissioner seats decide that archery is not humane? I don't want to see you fling an arrow from a elevated position at a deer or an elk or whatever you're hunting, because we don't think that's humane anymore. And all of a sudden, all your archery folks, they're in the same position as these trappers. So it does happen like that. And you're exactly right. No one's safe in this.
Reinterpretations can really become a slippery slope. We're seeing that out west too with conservation. It's being rebranded. So preservation is being rebranded, and now that's what we're calling conservation.
Right.
We're going to see the same thing with words like humane. The words
Mhm.
will get twisted until they become a weapon against us.
No doubt. And that bastardization of conservation, the preservation, and what they've done to hijack that over the last decade plus has, it continues to grow. And unfortunately, in states like where you're at, it takes hold, it takes root, and it just becomes part of um, what people hear and think, and they're completely conflated. But at any rate, we've run pretty long on this program today, but there was a lot of news, a lot of things to cover, and a lot of forward looking, because while we celebrate now, we both know, and the audience knows, this work is never done. We are able to get in advance good stuff. We have our priority policies here at the organization, but the bad stuff is always out there. It's always sitting in the shadows, ready to pounce, and we stand ready to engage and continue to hopefully have these victories as much of a truly a pain in the ass that it really is. And I can tell you, as someone that was a commissioner for my county in the state of New Hampshire, I would look at stuff like this that was just time wasters, resource wasters. Every time you have a meeting, the lights are on, you're paying law enforcement officers to be there overtime, you're paying staff to be there, that is overtime. And they just, again, this is by design to be that way. Until people just get so annoyed they bow down, and it's a tactic. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing. And on our side, people in the middle have to wise up to it and just, nope, you've been heard, and we're stopping it here because this is antithetical to the mission. All right, I'm on the soapbox, man. I'm like 10 feet high. My heart's racing. I'm fired up, Marie. These are important issues, and we've got to get more people fired up like that.
Yes, they are. And it's worth being fired up over. And that is why, even though we are celebrating these 2 wins out west, we're not slowing down. And our efforts will continue at the same pace, if not even more, so that we can ensure that we are protecting sportsmen and women and our traditions and our heritage.
Yeah, no doubt. Marie, congratulations. Great job. And hats off to all your partners out there, and legislators that got involved as well to shout some of this down. So the model works. The folks we work with show up, and this is proof positive. Marie, thanks so much.
Shout out to our Oregon caucus co-chairs.
Yes.
Gareth Broadman and Senators David Brocksmith. They've been great supporters throughout this effort against IP28, and they've been helping us share the news as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'd be remiss and not fair if we didn't acknowledge the governor there for whatever the motivations were. She came out as well not too long. I think we talked about this in a prior episode, but even the governor of Oregon acknowledged this is foolhardy and should not be taken up. So there you have it. All right, let's put a bow on this week. Marie, great to see you again. And one last time, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll see you next time. Hopefully you're more rested. Thanks, Marie.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.